Good morning. Please stand for singing.
So the senior song, In My Life, was kind of, well, I might say a disaster yesterday. So seniors, this was your pick. Rather overwhelming majority chose this. So you guys need to help lead this, right? Here we go.
You may be seated. I was up here struggling too, so I think one day we should actually listen to the song, because I also don't know how it goes. But we're gonna get through. We're gonna get there. Today is Tuesday, May 9th, and it's a B-Day on your schedule. Today for lunch is the joy I get from not saying what lunch is. And now for today's announcements. To the SGA and all clubs that have done their elections or are working on it, as you should, I'll try to get next year's charters out by the end of this week and explain how all of that is going to work. Are there any faculty announcements?
No, Mike, but that's okay. I can shout. Today, lunch begins at 12:01, so we'll have ensemble in here for the first 10 minutes. Glee Club just plan on coming at 12:10, right? It'll be both of them very brief rehearsals today. Thanks.
Any other faculty announcements? Then I'd like to invite up Ms. Marlette to tell us about our guest speaker.
Good morning. I've been waiting for this day for a few months now. I know Dr. Block since she was your age, sitting where you are. I had the opportunity to work with her when she was in high school. Dr. Block is a physician as well as an author, and I've read her previous books. They are thrillers, and this book that she is introducing to us today is her first in the young adult category. Is that the right word, category? I will say one of the things I remember very fondly about Dr. Block is she's always used her voice, never afraid to speak up, say what she thinks, and I love the fact that she's both a physician and a writer, doing two things that she loves. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to an old friend and SEM parent, parent of a former student, not a former parent, still a parent. Welcome her to SEM to speak with you this morning.
My glasses. Oh, I got them, my readers, I got them. Thank you, everyone, and thanks for the readers as well. I hadn't really thought about that. All right, here we go. 5 years ago at my college reunion, I met a fellow writer classmate. Back in school, I only knew her peripherally. At the time of the reunion, I just published my first book, which was featured on a table with books written by all my other classmates from that year. Hers was on the table too. She had been a writer since college and said, "Oh, I just write romance novels." Sure enough, her covers were racy with smoldering men kissing smoldering women, as corny and lowbrow as you might imagine for a romance novel. I'll circle back around to her at the end of the talk. When I was in college, I couldn't decide whether to be a writer or go into medicine. In my heart, I'd always dreamed of being a writer, but I found the workings of the brain fascinating too. I ended up being a neurologist, and my practical side pulled me towards medical school. In college, I majored in English while simultaneously taking pre-med courses as all of my electives, essentially hedging my bets. As an English major at Harvard, I was reading literature with a big L and very pompous pronunciation. Authors like Saul Bellow, Thomas Pynchon, Chaucer, Shakespeare, Hemingway, F. Scott Fitzgerald. If this sounds like a bunch of dead white guys to you, well, you're right about that. My college wasn't very woke in the early 90s, though they threw in Gabriel Garcia Marquez and Toni Morrison probably because people complained. Anyway, the point is we weren't reading thrillers or romance. I wanted to be like these dead white men, to better the world and make a dent in history, which you couldn't really do in genre fiction. If you think that sounds juvenile and grandiose, well, you're right about that too. But I felt like I could not contribute enough to this world by writing, then why even do it? Medicine, on the other hand, was an easy win in this regard. It's said so often that it's a cliche. Why do you want to go into medicine? I wanted to help people. So I became a doctor. I do not regret that. There are worse ways to spend your 20s than learning how to heal people. And over the years, I can say I made a difference. I saved lives, quite literally, and I'm proud of that. And maybe I wasn't making a dent in history, but I was, in fact, helping people. But I couldn't escape the desire to write. So around 10 years ago at age 40, I started writing again in earnest. To cut a long story short, I wrote a book, got an agent, and got published. And finally at the reunion, I was thrilled to be put on the shelf with all the other Harvard authors. No, I did not write anything that could be remotely considered a classic. I wrote thrillers. Thrillers were my jam. Yes, I was writing the dreaded genre fiction. In my newest novel, I turned to young adult thrillers. Izzy is a 15-year-old girl stuck on a boring cruise ship with her parents. Then she meets Jade, a girl in the teen hangout group, and they become fast friends. Until one day, Jade disappears. Everyone thinks she's jumped, taken her own life. Izzy doesn't believe it, but someone doesn't want her to know the truth. And if she's not careful, she might not get off the ship alive. Tagline, they said she fell, don't believe them. Tagline, the perfect cruise turns perfectly wrong, cue movie voice. So, being stuck on a cruise to Bermuda with your parents, I'd call this kind of a first world problem, right? Which is to say my writing hasn't solved world hunger or added me to the pantheon of great authors, but I have made people feel, laugh, cry, chew their fingernails in dread, and use their brains to puzzle out the killer. In other words, I have entertained people. Not world-altering, but then again, maybe it is. Because books, no matter the genre, have the ability to soothe, nurture, and heal. Books allow you to travel to Bermuda or anywhere, really. Spending hours in another world can open your world wider. So, yes, I would even say world-altering. And even if not, even if it just provides an escape, well, that's okay too. That's more than okay. Providing entertainment and light in this world, which is all too heavy at times, is a definite service to humanity. I didn't understand this back in college, that using your talents to entertain could be a service too. So when you decide to do what you want to do with your life, keep this in mind. Helping is important, but so is being true to your cause. And if you live your truth, you will find ways to better the world. I promised I'd circle back to my colleague from the reunion. Her name is Julie Potlinger, but she goes by a pen name Julia Quinn. She writes historical romances with cheesy, gaudy covers, and last year her books were made into this little show on Netflix called Bridgerton. Maybe you've heard of it? So remember, follow your dreams. You never know where they might lead you. So I'm just going to read a couple of pages. There's a few sections I could choose from, but I chose from this one. It's a little bit early on in the novel when she's just met her friend Jade. Now, Izzy is completely like geeky, not confident, not at all like I was in high school. No, not a bit. So, and they are sneaking into another passenger's room to steal liquor bottles. So a disclaimer, I'm not advocating that anyone break into anyone's room to steal liquor bottles, but it's kind of fun for the book. What are we doing? I loud whisper. Oh, I need to also apologize in advance for a horrendous Southern accent, but I try. What are we doing? I loud whisper. The place smells of air freshener. Piles of folded clothes dot the room. Bottles of lotion cover every possible surface, with guidebooks spilled on the table and an expensive-looking pair of binoculars strewn on one of the chairs. Jade opens the minibar with a little dangling key and peers inside. "Score!" she trills, sweeping the contents, a plethora of multicolored mini bottles, into her satchel purse. They clink together as she zips it up. "Jade, what are we doing?" I repeat, though it's clear what we're doing. She lifts her fingers to her lips again, tilting her ear towards the door. I hear it too. Footsteps. We wait while my heart beats so hard it hurts my chest. The footsteps get louder, but then pause. We both take a deep breath of relief, but then it happens. We hear a key card sliding into the door. Jade yanks my arm and we scramble under the bed. The dust invades my nostrils along with the smell of wet bathing suit that somehow ended up there. We're both curled into the fetal position, jammed next to each other, our foreheads almost touching. "Oh, I shouldn't have had that second plate of nachos. I am stuffed," says a female voice with a strong Southern accent. "Free food, baby, bring it on," a male voice says with the exact same accent. I see large flip-flop feet with chipped orange nail polish, followed by a pair of male feet with bunions. I sip little breaths so they can't hear me. "Hey," the man says, "you want to get a little busy?" His lewd tone allows no misinterpretation. Jade's eyes open wider. "No, no, no, God, please, no." "Hon, I'm too full," she answers. "Sorry. You want to do the bird watching thing?" I start breathing again, and Jade shuts her eyes. "Oh, yeah," he answers, sounding unfazed by the rejection. "Let me just grab my binoculars." "I think they're under the bed," she says. "No," I scream in my head. "They're on the chair," he answers, swooping them up. "Okay, let's get a move on. Starts in like 10 minutes. She says, followed by the sound of stretching and bone cracking. "Oh, my neck is so stiff." Footsteps sound again, this time heading away from us. "Hey, wait a second." The chipped toenails stop. "Wasn't the key in the minibar?" A pause. My mouth goes dry. "That's it? We're dead? We're busted? Getting thrown off this ship?" "I don't know," the man says. "Let's go already." Okay, she mutters. "Don't get your panties in a bunch. I'm not getting mad." The words fade as the door swings slowly shut. We wait there a minute in case of a check back for a forgotten item, but only silence remains. So we roll out from under the bed and open a door, a crack, and Jade checks for them in the hallway. Once we're sure the coast is clear, we tear out of there and down the hall, her purse jingling with liquor bottles. We almost barged into a middle-aged couple at full speed. Hey, the man says in a Southern accent. Binoculars bounce on his belly. "Be careful, girls, there ain't no fire." I check his feet, see bunions, and gasp, and then we keep running until we get out of the staterooms area and into the vestibule by the elevator. I can't help it. I start laughing, and Jade joins in. "Oh, my God," she squeaks through gals. "You want to get a little busy?" she says in a near-perfect Southern imitation. I'm crying now, stamping my foot because I can't stop, and we collapse onto the floor, laughing so hard we can barely even breathe. So that gives you a little idea of the taste of the book. It's light, it's funny, hopefully at times, and as it goes on, it gets a little more intense and more scary. And you feel the claustrophobia of the book a bit more as well, being on a ship. Someone said, we made the point, which is true, that it's a sort of like a closed-door novel. There's a ship. It can only be so many people, and that's the type of mystery that it is. So I would classify it as a mystery and a thriller, too. I would be happy to answer any questions. I probably haven't talked very long, but happy to answer any questions and then sign any books if people want me to sign them. Yep. Okay, yes. So she asked, how long does it take from an idea to a completed novel? Well, in this case, it was kind of an odd situation that's never occurred for me before. My agent threw off this email that said, like, hey, do you have any YA thriller ideas? And I had absolutely no YA thriller ideas, so I said, yeah, sure, of course I do. And I threw together like 5 ideas. The cheesiest one that I almost didn't put in there was the cruise one. So, of course, I get an email back like 10 minutes later. Oh, they love the cruise one. Can you write up 20 pages and send it to me? So I wrote up 20 pages, which, again, is not my usual way of working. Like, I'm thinkative. I look at my quill a lot. That's sort of the way I work. But I had Izzy start talking, and she had a really strong voice, so I followed it, and I gave it to my agent, and 2 days later, they had a book deal offer. So that is crazy fast in this world. Usually it takes 6 months, a year. I mean, it takes a while, at least in my experience, to get a book deal. It's never this fast, but in this case, the publisher knew what they were looking for, and they were the ones who reached out to her, and she reached out to me, so I think that cut to the chase a little bit. They wanted some more authors for their underlined thriller line. So then I wrote the book, and I'm writing the book, and August 8th was the date that it was going to come out. So I'm writing. I give it in, and they give me an editorial page, paperback. The editor writes this whole thing. You hope for like maybe a 1-2 page thing telling you what you could do. This was 5 pages, single-spaced. And I'm like, oh, crap, I didn't say that word. And I was a little bit taken aback, but I just wrote, and, she said, oh, can you have this back in like 4 weeks? I mean, that's insane, right? That's insane. That's like rewriting the book in 4 weeks. So I'm trying my best. We're going back and forth with different things, reviews and changes. And then in a little bit, I get this email from the audio people saying, we're so excited about the book. Here's some different people. We want you to listen to some different voices. Tell us who you like. They gave us like 3 different voices. And they said, and we plan to come out the same day as your book on May 3rd. And I'm like, May 3rd? It's supposed to be August 8th. So I reached out to my editor and said, do they have that wrong? I mean, isn't it May 8th? And she said, oh, I didn't tell you. We moved it up to May 3rd so we could get a longer, beach kind of read theme out there. So that's how important the author is, that I had no clue, and it kind of explains why they wanted all of my rewrites in 4 weeks. I just thought they were like kind of crazy, but turns out they had some method to their madness. So that's a long answer to a short question. Yep.
So you're a neurologist, so I'm thinking you're pretty busy in your life. So I'm just curious, where do you find the time, and do you have a routine where you sit down, specific hours where you write, and a specific place where you do it?
Yes, I do. I write in the morning, so that was part of the problems. I tried to write a novel in my residency, and I gave out 100 queries, that's what you call it, to try to get an agent. And that was back in the day where you wrote, like you typed, and a computer spit out the paper really slow, and then you used this envelope thing and a stamp. Maybe you guys have heard of them. And I sent out literally 100 queries, and guess how many offers I got? Goose egg, right? So I took my ball home, and that's what I did for 20 years, essentially. And part of the problem in that time, I wrote a lot of sort of aborted novels here and there, but I was always exhausted at the end of the day, and I've always considered myself kind of a night owl, essentially. So I didn't really even think about waking up early to write, and that's when I realized, well, I've had no energy at the end of the day. I've got kids, I have a job, it's pretty stressful. I just want to sort of veg out and watch The Bachelor or whatever. So I realized, I got to change things, and the change I made was to write in the morning, and it really worked really well. So that's what I do. I write for about half hour to an hour in the morning, and I usually write at the kitchen table looking outside because I have this whole bird feeder set up, and I love looking at the birds. Sometimes I'll write on the porch, looking out at the pretty trees and stuff. If I'm on a vacation at the beach, I love writing, looking out at the beach. So I guess the theme is I really like having some natural surroundings while I'm writing. It kind of calms me down and gets me into this trance zone that you got to be in to write, at least for me. Uh-huh.
So you said that you came back to writing when you turned 40, or about 40, right? And I know that a lot of students, and myself, we have all of these different passions that sort of are in the back of our minds. What was that experience like for you? Because I feel like oftentimes we feel like we have to do everything right away, and to think about going back to something in your 40s is that's too old.
For sure. Actually, I remember as 25, 26 in my residency, having this goal that I'd be a published author by age 30. And that goal went by the wayside. But when I was a published author at age 41, I was like, that's not too bad, right? 10 years. I took yoga. Does anyone take yoga here, do yoga? Okay, so I was in that hot yoga where your brain is fried. And then the guy got, sexual harassment, and so they don't have that type of yoga anymore, Bikram or whatever, which is good. But in any case, I was really hot. I don't do yoga anymore because I injured myself in 5 ways, which is fascinating that you could do that doing yoga, but I did. But anyway, there was this sign in there from Bikram that said, "You're never too old, you're never too sick, you're never too tired to start from scratch and start over." And I would see this sign while I was sweaty and bleary-brained every week, and it kind of just spoke to me as, it was a sign, no pun intended. And I thought to myself, if you want to do this, you just got to do this. Or just say, I can't do this. But if you're going to regret it if you don't. And that's when I kind of took it more seriously and started again. And I think maybe I was ready. Maybe I wasn't ready when I was a little younger. I was writing, books about tortured people writing. That's something that most people really want to read, right? So, I think I was ready. Yep. I read, it's funny because I've always mostly read women's fiction, which to me is just literary fiction written by women. So so they call it women's fiction because it's not written by men. Anyway, so I've mostly read that through my life, and I still do. That's sort of the mixture is mostly mystery, thriller, and women's fiction. And when I look back on it, when I was a kid, I would read like Jupiter Jones, Encyclopedia Brown. So I was really into that as a kid, but it kind of got away from me. I read Sharp Objects. I think that's the first one, Gillian Flynn. And I was like, mind blown. This is a totally different voice, not the hard-boiled detective voice, maybe a soft-boiled detective voice. And I thought, I can do this. So honestly, she was the inspiration. Then she wrote, I forget which book came next, and then of course Gone Girl. And when Gone Girl came out, I was one of those like, oh, I already knew about her, you know. I read her 5 years ago. You're so uncool, right? But she really inspired me, and I think that's why I dove into that genre, because I felt like I could. Well, I have patience in some of my Zoe Goldman books. So my Zoe Goldman books are about Zoe Goldman, who's a psychiatrist, not a neurologist. Okay, she's from Buffalo. Okay, she's Jewish. Okay, but she's really tall, so it's not me. Okay. She has ADHD, and she's a psychiatrist. She's got a bunch of her own issues. Her voice is like crazy all over the place. I don't have diagnosed ADHD. Anyway, what were you asking? Okay, so real people. So there are some patients. They're not like they're kind of conglomerates of patients, but there's this one completely manic patient in one of the books who's going on about big pharma and, you know, like word salad, using word rhymes, like all these kind of crazy things. And she said, what is normal? Normal is just a setting on a washing machine. And that's a direct quote from a patient. So I do have some stuff in there that kind of is like that. Other than that, main characters, no, I'd say not really off of anyone. Yep. Did you say words? Okay, so that is such a deep question. I'm having a hard time. That's a really good question. You know, as I mentioned, I think words can be transformative and healing. My book came out with the day of the SCOTUS leak. That was not a happy day for me. I mean, I'll just put my politics right out there. I was crying the night before. I was really just a mess. And it was really difficult to that day say, oh, hey, look, my book's out. It's about this girl on a cruise, you know, when the world is falling apart around us. I was angry that someone stole my joy, in a sense. So, but at the same time, I feel like, and maybe it's a cop-out, but words do heal, and words are important to heal. And in my life, there have been times when I've very much turned to words for comfort and books for comfort. And so to me, I guess it's spiritual, maybe not religious in an organized sense, but spiritual. And writing has the same feel to me as reading, a little bit different zone that your mind is in. But that's my connection to words is the Buffalo, Just Buffalo. Anyone hear that? So I'm on that board, and part of their, what they say about their mission statement is that we try to transform lives through the arts, and transforming lives and communities through writing and reading in literature. And I think that's true, and I think that's what I strive to do. There was a question back there, too. don't write with pen and paper. My handwriting, I could totally use OT at this point. It's really bad. It's not even just doctor handwriting. They had this thing for my last book, What Happened That Night. They had this book group type thing where it was part of this thing that they sent out different books each month, and I was invited to be in it. And part of what you do is you write a handwritten note about that goes out, right? But the problem was, if we did have a PowerPoint, I would put up there how embarrassing that looked. It was that bad that I couldn't decide what, like, it was due. Do I have someone write it for me? So I ended up just writing like a few little lines and sort of a heart, because that's basically all I could write without looking like a third grader, really. So no, I don't write. My writing, I used to write when I would write poetry. I wrote poetry through high school and college, but I stopped writing poetry because I just sort of lost the desire to write poetry, and I would write handwriting at that time. But my thought process is faster than my handwriting process, so I type. I have a computer and I type. Yep. So you're asking, am I a plotter or a pantser? That's those are the terms of art in the writing world. I'm more of a plotter. Every time I've tried to write a pantser, it's kind of like become this mishmash, and it's not really sellable. So I am more of a plotter. I write out a very kind of brief outline. It's not a 16-page outline, which some people do. It's a pretty it's a synopsis, maybe 4 pages. And then I start writing, and I write scene by scene pretty much, so maybe 1 or 2 scenes, and then I always like to start the next scene, because if you don't, then you look at this blank paper and it's very scary. So that's basically how I write. I sort of use a 3-act structure, and that's part of what drives the plot, pretty basic. If the Greeks could do it and it was good for them, it's good for me too. As for character versus plot, I'd say it's a little bit of both. I had What Happened That Night started with a visualization of 2 characters, Dahlia and James, and I had a vague idea of where I wanted to take that, but the picture of them on the cover, which ended up not being the cover at all, which is fine, was sort of what drove that book. Whereas Zoe Goldman, I had the idea, and then I had to think of a character that fit that idea. And even though it's probably my most character-driven novel, it was the idea that came first in that one. And in my second of the Zoe Goldman novels, in my first Zoe Goldman novel, the last line is what came first for me. In the second one, it was the first line. And I had to sort of say, okay, what is that line telling me, and where do I go from here? Uh-huh.
What's your favorite book you've ever read, or like the book that makes you most excited for other people to read?
So it's kind of like asking who your favorite child is, But I would say that Little Black Lies, which was my first book, my Zoe Goldman, is the one who got me my agent and got me my first book deal. So I feel like I owe Zoe, for that. And that was my, got a finalist for the International Thriller Writers Award, which is sort of a big thing, so that helped get my name out there. I didn't win. Oh, well. But, so I would say if I had to pick, it would probably be that one. My most financially successful book is probably the second one, The Girl Without a Name. All right.
Well, I have to get to the microphone because it's live stream.
Yes.
But We'll duck. Stay right here. Thank you all, and I think you are fortunate to get to know what a interesting, wonderfully smart, funny person Dr. Block is. Those of you who have her book already, if you'd like her to sign, I know she will. If not, I think Miss Cunningham is still has a few, but just a few minutes if you'd like to get the book signed by Dr. Block. All of her books that I have been signed by her, so I'm going to run down and grab mine. But I want you all to say thank you to Dr. Block, and I hope she's inspired you kind of the way she has me. I've got some things I have to get doing here as time goes on, so thank you.
Thank you.
You want me to end it?
If you have a book that you would like to get signed, you can go get it. Otherwise, everyone have a great day. Get to class.